For a long time, countries competed for capital, for factories, for investment, for technology, for trade routes. Now something else is becoming scarce: workers. Not just any workers, young workers, skilled workers, healthy workers, tax-paying workers, people who can support aging societies and keep economic systems moving. That is the shift. The future is no longer only about who has the most money or the biggest market. It is increasingly about who still has enough people to make growth possible. That is why countries are starting to compete for fewer workers. Not because labor suddenly matters more than everything else. Because without labor, more and more systems stop working the way they used to. When people think about labor shortages, they often imagine a local problem. Restaurants can't hire, factories need staff, hospitals need nurses, construction firms need crews. That is part of the story, but the deeper story is bigger. This is not just about vacant jobs. It is about demographics. In many countries, birth rates have fallen, populations are aging, and the number of working-age people is no longer growing the way it once did. That changes the whole economic equation, because economies do not only need consumers, they need producers, taxpayers, caregivers, builders, operators, engineers, drivers, skilled workers, and younger cohorts large enough to support older ones. Once that balance weakens, labor stops being abundant. And when labor stops being abundant, competition changes. This is the key shift. Workers are no longer just part of the economy. They are becoming a strategic asset inside it. A country with enough workers has more room to grow. It can produce more, tax more, support more retirees, absorb more industrial activity, sustain more public systems. A country without enough workers faces a different future. Growth slows, tax burdens rise, care systems strain, recruitment costs rise, and more of the economy becomes a struggle to maintain existing capacity rather than expand it. That is why labor is becoming geopolitical. It is not only a business problem anymore. It is becoming a national advantage or a national constraint. The problem is not simply that there are fewer people. It is that the ratio is changing. More retirees, fewer workers, more care demand, less labor supply. That creates pressure in two directions at once. First, countries need enough workers to keep the economy functioning. Second, they need enough workers to financially support the systems serving older populations. That means aging societies do not just face a labor shortage. They face a support shortage. And once enough countries enter that phase at the same time, competition intensifies. Because each one is trying to solve a similar problem with a shrinking global pool of younger labor. That is a very different world from one where workers were assumed to be plentiful. This is one reason immigration becomes more important. Not only socially, economically. Countries with aging populations often need younger workers to stabilize labor markets, support tax systems, and fill sectors that cannot function without people. Healthcare, construction, logistics, agriculture, hospitality, care work, technical roles, maintenance, public services. That does not mean immigration is simple. It affects politics, housing, culture, identity, planning, and social cohesion. But economically, the logic becomes clearer. If domestic labor supply weakens, external labor becomes more valuable. That is why immigration policy is increasingly tied not just to borders, but to economic survival. In other words, some countries are no longer only asking, who do we allow in? They are quietly asking, how do we stay functional without them? Not all countries compete equally. Wealthier countries usually have stronger currencies, higher wages, better institutions, more educational infrastructure, and greater long-term stability. That gives them an advantage. They can attract workers from poorer or more fragile regions. That is important, because it means labor shortages do not only create internal stress, they can also reshape global inequality. A nurse trained in one country may leave for another. An engineer may emigrate. A skilled technician may relocate. A doctor may move where pay is higher. A younger worker may leave a weaker system for a stronger one. So while one country solves a shortage, another may deepen its own. This is how competition for workers can become a global transfer of human capacity. And that has consequences. When skilled workers leave, countries lose more than headcount. They lose capability, hospitals lose staff, schools lose talent, businesses lose experience, governments lose tax base, local systems lose resilience. This is what makes labor competition difficult. The same movement that helps one economy stabilize can make another economy more fragile. That is why worker scarcity is not just a hiring story, it is a capacity story. The question is not only can we fill this role, it is, can this country keep the people needed to make the system work at all? That is a much deeper challenge. And once skilled migration accelerates, the competition stops being quiet, it becomes structural. There is a common response to all of this: automation. And yes, automation matters. Robotics can help. Software can improve efficiency. AI can reduce some forms of labor demand. Digital systems can lower administrative load, but not everything can be automated equally. Care work still needs people. Construction still needs people. Maintenance still needs people. Transport still needs people. Public-facing services still need people. Aging societies especially need people. That matters because countries cannot fully automate their way out of demographic pressure. They can soften it, delay it, reduce some parts of it, but they cannot eliminate the need for human labor in the sectors that hold daily life together. So the competition remains. It just changes shape. This also affects where industries go. Companies do not only ask where is labor cheapest, they increasingly ask where is labor available. That changes investment decisions. A country may have good policy, strong incentives, and access to capital, but if it cannot provide enough workers, expansion becomes harder. That matters for manufacturing, infrastructure, semiconductors, energy projects, transport systems, and other sectors where scaling still depends heavily on people. So worker scarcity starts influencing industrial geography. Factories, supply chains, and strategic industries do not only follow incentives, they follow labor availability. That makes population structure an economic advantage in a way many countries are only beginning to fully absorb. If workers become scarcer, education changes too. Countries start caring more about which skills they produce, how quickly they produce them, and whether graduates stay. That means training becomes more strategic, not just for individual opportunity, but for national capacity. Healthcare training, engineering pipelines, technical apprenticeships, care workforce development, STEM retention, vocational systems, language integration for migrants. These stop being side issues. They become part of economic planning, because a country that cannot build or retain useful labor becomes more dependent, more fragile, and less able to control its own future. That is one reason the worker question is bigger than employment. It touches national design. They are also competing for families. This is the deeper demographic layer. If a country wants future workers, it needs future births or future migration. That means the competition is not just about hiring adults. It is also about whether younger people can afford to stay, build families, buy homes, raise children, and remain inside the system. That makes housing, childcare, urban design, transport, schooling, and quality of life part of labor competition too. Because if people cannot imagine a future in a country, the country cannot assume it will have workers later. That is why worker competition becomes so broad. It reaches far beyond the workplace. For decades, many economies operated as if labor would remain available. Maybe expensive, maybe politically difficult, but available. That assumption is weakening. Now the future may belong less to the places with the lowest wages and more to the places with enough workers, enough skills, enough integration capacity, and enough stability to hold productive people over time. That is a major shift, because once workers become scarce, labor stops being just another input. It becomes a bottleneck, and bottlenecks change power. Countries are competing for fewer workers because modern economies need more human support, then many of them can now produce internally. Aging raised dependency. Falling birth rates weakened replacement. Migration became more strategic, and labor-intensive systems remain harder to automate than expected. That combination changed the game. This is no longer only about labor shortages. It is about which countries can still maintain the human base required to function, grow, and absorb the future. That is the deeper pattern. Labor is becoming infrastructure, and infrastructure is always fought over when it becomes scarce. The world is getting older, and in that world, workers matter differently. They are not only employees, they are tax base, care capacity, industrial capacity, state capacity, future capacity. That is why countries are starting to compete for fewer workers, because what once looked like a demographic trend is becoming an economic contest. And in the years ahead, one of the most important questions may no longer be which country has the most capital. It may be which country still has enough people to make that capital useful.